Method of practice.
Lecture method. In this approach, the teacher explains the lesson while students listen, take notes, and ask questions. The lecture method is a teaching approach where the teacher delivers an oral presentation like the lesson to the students, while the teacher explains the materials and the students listen attentively, jot down notes, may ask questions for clarifications.
Discussion method. Here, students actively share ideas, opinions, and insights. The teacher acts as a facilitator, guiding the conversation.
The discussion method is a teaching approach where students freely share their ideas, opinions, and insights about a topic. The teacher does not dominate the lesson, but instead guides the flow of conversation to help students to think deeper and learn from each other. Demonstration method. The teacher shows how something is done, such as a scientific experiment, a dance step, or a technical skill, while students observe and later perform the task themselves. The demonstration method is a teaching approach where the teacher shows how a task or skills is done. Students watch the step closely, understand the process, and they practice it on their own. Collaborative and cooperative learning. This method develops teamwork, social skills, responsibility, and problem-solving abilities, making learning more interactive and meaningful. Collaborative or cooperative learning is a method where students work together in groups to complete tasks or solve problems. It builds teamwork, communication, responsibility, and problem-solving skills while making learning more engaging.
Next is inquiry-based learning. This method strengthens curiosity, creativity, and higher-order thinking skills. For example, the teacher asks, "Why do plants bend toward light?" Students design their own experiments, observe growth over a week, recorded data, and drew conclusions. This hands-on curiosity-driven process helped them to discover the science of photosynthesis themselves. Next, we have the project-based learning. This method connects learning to real-life situations and allows students to apply what they have learned in practical ways. For example, after the teacher discusses being helpful, as a student sees an elderly man having trouble crossing the busy street, they gently offer an arm, look both ways, and walk with him safely to the other side, turning the classroom lesson into a kind and real-life action. Next, we have the experiential learning. It involves learning through direct experience, such as field trips, hands-on activities, simulations, and role-playing. Students learn by doing, reflecting, and applying their experience to new situations. For example, as a student simulate running a small cafe, they take orders, calculate prices, and manage supplies, and solve the unexpected issues. Learning by doing the work, reflecting on what went well, and applying those problem-solving skills to daily tasks. Last, we have the technology-based learning. This includes the using of multimedia, educational apps, online platforms, and digital tools to enhance learning. Technology makes learning more engaging, accessible, and interactive. An example for this is the student to learn about public speaking. Students watch YouTube videos of effective speeches. They analyze techniques like tone and body language, practice by recording their own talks, and give feedback to peers, using a platform to build a practical communication skills.
Let's discuss fixed practice. Consistent environment, the condition remain the same each time the skill is performed. Repetition, the skills is the repeated multiple times to improve performance. Focus on technique, emphasis is on developing proper techniques and consistency. The example of fixed practice is drills for close and skills like a basketball free throw. Advantage of fixed practice is prove consistent, help develop muscle, memory, and consistent in performance. Build confidence, repeated success can boost athlete confidence. And third, sustainable for beginners, useful for learning new skills and techniques. So the disadvantage of fixed practice is limited adaptability. Athletes may struggle to adapt to a changing condition.
Let's discuss about mass practice. Mass practice is when one skill is practiced repetitively without breaks. This is a continuous form of practice which is best for simple skills. So this type of practice works best for simple skills that do not require a lot of complex decision making. Because there are no rest intervals, the learner is pushed to continue even when tired, which can help simulate real game fatigue. An example would be a rally in badminton, where the learner must repeatedly perform a drop shots. This causes fatigue and therefore simulates the late stages of a game. This practice method is most appropriate for closed and self-paced skills similarly to fixed practice. As there are no breaks, the fitness of the performer must be taken into account when deciding how long the session will be. Based on the definition and example, mass practice is most effective for closed and self-paced skills. Skills performed in a predictable environment where the performer controls the timing, like throwing, passing in an empty space, or hitting a stationary target. I mentioned earlier about fatigue because one of the main characteristics of mass practice is fatigue. Practicing without rest forces the learner to perform even when they're tired, which can be useful because it mimics the later stages of a game where athletes must maintain skill execution despite exhaustion. However, it also means coaches must plan practice wisely to avoid burnout and must consider the athlete's fitness level when planning practice duration because too much mass practice can lead to decreased performance or even injury. Let's move to the advantages of mass practice. First, it can help improve the consistency of skills and move them into the autonomous phase of learning. This phase involves further practice of the skills in order to enhance performance so that it becomes automatic. Second, appropriate to closed and self-paced skills. Next is the disadvantages of mass practice. It can be boring and demotivating for the performer as it is very repetitive. Second, as there are no breaks, there is no extrinsic feedback from a coach. Third, the quality of training may deteriorate as the performer becomes increasingly fatigued. Based on the disadvantage and advantage of mass practice, improve endurance, consistency, and make the skill automatic, ideal for closed and self-paced activities like shooting free throws, but it used too long or with complex skills. It can cause error and physical strain. It can also be boring and tiring, leading to less motivation and more fatigue, with fewer opportunities for coach feedback. Therefore, the learner fitness level should always be considered when designing mass practice sessions.
Distributed practice. This is when there are breaks during the training. This allows the performer to rest and receive extrinsic feedback from coach. For example, a 100-meter runner could run 100 meters then go back to a coach to receive feedback on how to improve technique. This type of practice means the performer doesn't get too tired and helps prevent boredom. However, the performer may not get the time to practice, so it takes longer to learn. This method of practice is most useful for continuous skills, but can be applied to almost any skills type. And distributed practice, also known as spaced repetition, the spacing effect or spaced practice is a learning strategy where practice is broken up into a number of short sessions over a longer period of time. Advantages of distributed practice: can receive extrinsic feedback from a coach between performances. Extrinsic feedback is feedback from outside the performer. Extrinsic is important as someone watching the skills can observe and explain what needs to be done. Performer can rest and recover both physically and mentally. And having intervals allows for mental rehearsal. Disadvantages of distributed practice: time may be managed ineffectively, so the rest interval is longer than the working interval. It can be time-consuming, may be boring and demotivating for the individual.
Mental rehearsal. Before that, let me discuss first what is mental rehearsal. Mental rehearsal is a teaching and learning method where students practice a skill in their mind before performing it in real life. It involves visualizing, imagining the steps, the actions, and the successful performance of a task. And it is also known as mental practice like visualization and imaginary rehearsal. Let's proceed to the purpose of mental rehearsal. First, builds confidence before performance. Helps students remember the steps of a task. Reduces anxiety and fear. Enhances accuracy and task execution. And last, prepares students for tasks that are difficult, risky, or require precision. Next, how mental rehearsal works. The teachers guides learners to relax and clear their mind, visualize themselves in performing a task. Where mental rehearsal can be used. It can be used in academic tasks like visualizing solving a math problem and imagining reading a paragraph aloud. In performance tasks, speech delivery, oral reading, role-playing in English or values education. In skills and procedures, CPR steps, laboratory procedure, technical work or TLE, and safety routines. And in sports and physical activities, basketball shooting, gymnastic routines, and dance sequence. Okay, let's proceed to the example of mental rehearsal in basketball shooting. Classic example of mental rehearsal in basketball performance task is a player visualizing a successful free throw just before taking the shot. This technique involves mentally going through the entire process, engaging all the senses to program the mind and body for a successful outcome. And here's the example of basketball shooting in free throw. First step, strong side in line with target, feet hip width. Second step, eye is in the basket shooting, bat down, dribble on shot line, weight forward in toes. Next, third step, ball travels in straight line, follow through in middle of frame, weight up in toes. And the last step is put it all together. By consistently repeating this detailed mental rehearsal, that it strengthens the neural pathways associated with the motor skills required for a successful free throw, building confidence and focus for the actual performance. And the last one, let's proceed to the advantage and disadvantage of mental rehearsal. The advantage of mental rehearsal. First, improve performance, enhances skills and technique. Second, boosts confidence, builds self-assurance and confidence. Third, reduces anxiety, helps manage stress and anxiety. Fourth, cost-effective, no physical equipment or space required. And the last one is flexible, can be done anywhere and anytime. Next, Next is the disadvantage of mental rehearsal. First, limited physical practice cannot replace physical practice entirely. Second, distraction. Mental rehearsal can be affected by distraction or lack of focus. The last one is overconfidence. May lead to overconfidence if not combined with physical practice.
Full practice. Full practice is sometimes used by sports coach because some skills are very difficult to break down. Sprinting, cycling, swimming. Full practice is when a sports coach teaches the skills together without breaking these apart. Example, swimming. Learning a full swimming stroke, for example, freestyle or backstroke, by performing the complete arm action, leg kick and breathing in sequence to develop a natural feel and timing for the movement. This method is useful because it allows learners to experience the feel for skills and can be quicker to learn than part practice. Advantage of full practice. Develop a feel for the skill. Learners experience the natural flow and timing of the entire movement known as kinesthesis, which is crucial for coordinated motor skills. Faster learning for specific skills, for simple, discrete, or continuous skill. Learning the whole action can be quicker than the time-consuming process of breaking down, practicing parts, and resembling the skills. Disadvantage of full practice. Risk of poor quality. It may lower the quality of the overall performance because of the coach cannot provide detailed, target feedback on specific, isolated weaknesses. Unsuitable for complex, dangerous skills. It is not ideal for complex or potentially dangerous skills where an error in one part could pose a safety risk.
Alright everyone, after hearing all those thoughtful insights we shared so far, I think we're in a great spot to dive in. So now let's proceed to the progressive part practice. We will talk about step by step, starting with the basics and moving into more complex elements. So what is a progressive part practice? It is a method where a complex skill is broken down into smaller linked parts. These parts are taught and practiced individually, then progressively combined to form the complete skills. This approach allows for targeted practice on specific sub-skills and helps athletes understand how each part contributes to the whole. So here are the key points of progressive part practice. First, focuses on mastering individual components. Second, emphasize the connection between subroutines. Third, allow coaches to identify and correct weaknesses in the specific areas. Third, suitable for skills requiring a lot of information and processing. For example, here is the triple jump technique. The triple jump can be broken down into 4 key components: the run up, the hop, the step, and the jump into the sand. In progressive part practice, the coach would first focus on athletes' run up, ensuring proper speed and form. Next, the hop phase is taught, emphasizing correct technique and power generation. Then the step phase is introduced, focusing on maintaining momentum and balance. And finally, the jump into the sand is practiced, focusing on maximizing distance. As you can see, each phase is practiced individually and gradually linked to the previous one. The athlete first practices the run up and hop, then the run up, hop, and step, and finally, the complete triple jump sequence. This allows the athlete to master each component before combining them, leading to a more fluid and effective overall technique. That's all for progressive part practice.
Methods and types of practice. How many different ways are there to practice? So, the methods of practice, the type of practice used will depend on the skills to be improved. Coaches will use a practice method that suits the performer's personality and their learning needs. Whole practice. This practice involves repeating the whole series of actions. Gymnastic skills and games activities are easier to perform as whole. The actions can be performed over and over to protect them. Example, gymnastics vault to be effective, the whole action should be performed in its entirety. Whole part, whole practice. This method involves using both types of practice in combination. Firstly, the action is performed as a full, then elements of the skill are practiced. Finally, the whole action is tried again. Example, a beginner may be asked to try the full layup and then isolate various parts and eventually practice it as a whole again. Types of practice. Distributed practice. Distributed practice is when a rest interval is given to allow recuperation, feedback, coaching, and advice on technique can be given during the interval. Distributed practice is appropriate for beginners who can focus on the next part of the skill during the break. Performers who are unfit. Performers who need encouragement from the coach to improve motivation. Mass practice is appropriate for simple skills that demand little attention so the performer can still focus on the task after numerous attempts. Discrete skills with a clear end. These are usually short and sharp and can be undertaken.
Practice part whole practice. What is practice part whole practice? Practice part whole practice is a teaching method used in sport, physical education, music, and skill-based activities. It helps learners master a complex skill by breaking it down into smaller, manageable parts and then putting everything back together. Purpose. First, this method helps learners. Second, focus on difficult components. Third, reduce cognitive overload, improve coordination and accuracy, build confidence through gradual mastery. Example of practice part whole practice is swimming freestyle. First, swimming a full lap using freestyle. Second, practicing only the leg kick or the arm pull with a kickboard pull buoy. Third, recombining arm and leg movement in the full stroke. Here's the advantage of the practice part whole practice. First, easier to learn complex skills, helps focus on difficult parts, reduce mistake and confusion, builds confidence step by step, improve accuracy and coordination. Disadvantage of practice part whole practice. First, may break the natural flow of the skills, can take most time to teach and practice. Learners might rely too much on parts, not ideal for skills that must be performed continuously running.